Now, the test that all black cab drivers have to pass to secure a licence in London should be cut. That's according to a new report. Greater London Authority Conservatives are suggesting reducing the tests by 2/3. They say the current test is archaic and a big barrier to recruitment. Well, the test is known as the knowledge. It requires drivers to learn 320 basic routes. They have to learn 25,000 street names to become an all-London taxi driver. And they also have to learn about 20,000 landmarks within a 6-mile radius of Charing Cross in central London. Well, the test takes an average of 2 to 4 years to pass. I've been speaking to the man who's written the report, the Conservative member of the Greater London Assembly for Merton and Wandsworth, Richard Tracy, and asked him why he thought the knowledge should be reduced.
We're trying to be helpful to black cabs, actually, who are at the moment feeling rather besieged by the likes of Uber and all the other private hire vehicles that people find from apps on their iPhones. And this test, we think, is acting as a disincentive, particularly to young aspirant cabbies, men and women. Only 5% are under 35, and about 15 to 20% are over 70. And I think the average age is about 55. And so, you know, it's pretty clear that it isn't actually helping.
Well, that was just a little of what he had to say. Let's ask Steve McNamara, because he is here in his role as General Secretary for the Licensed Taxi Drivers Association. Hello, Steve. I guess you try to summarise what you feel most black cab drivers in London feel about this. Is that fair? I know it's an awful lot of them, but...
The reality is I'm rather surprised that anybody, let alone the Tory representative from the GLA, would be looking at lowering any standards. One of the problems in London at the moment is the low standards that the minicab industry have. The level of accidents is on the increase, the congestion that's resulting of the sheer number of minicabs in London, and he's suggesting lowering our standards.
Now Ben did talk to him at some length, and one of his key elements for him saying we think the knowledge test should be shorter, a bit easier, is that there aren't enough new entrants coming in to train as black cab drivers, because they feel it is, we know it's a massive job to do it, it takes many, many years to be successful, and he says there's just not enough people under the age of 30 who are coming in and want to be black cab drivers because...
Well, firstly, I don't know where he got his statistics from, and I would have thought the first people to speak to when you're talking about the taxi trade would be the taxi trade itself, or even representatives from CFL who deal with the knowledge, and he hasn't spoken to anyone. The first we knew of this report was the embargo press release yesterday. Hasn't taken the opportunity to speak to the taxi trade or actually find out his facts. The reality are that the number of people undertaking the knowledge is pretty static to what it's always been. It tends to go up, people signing on the knowledge in times of economic downturns, and it drops a bit when the economy picks up. This morning, 32 people passed out. They have a passing out parade once a week. Last week it was 25. I think next week it's 20. These figures are pretty consistent. Our numbers are actually up slightly of taxi drivers in London. He's got all his figures wrong. His proposals to lower the standard of the gold standard of taxi trade anywhere in the world we're known as the best taxi industry in the world. I mean, these suggestions of his are farcical. It'd be dangerous for London. How would you go about doing it? I mean, if the 2/3 of the streets I don't have to know where you live, what do we do? I can take you home, but I can't take you home. It's farcical.
Well, I think he would say it's driven by technology, because he did describe what you do as the gold standard around the world, but technology is changing. Sat-navs are not a panacea, of course, but we all know that lots and lots of minicab companies can just use a sat-nav and therefore are cheaper than a black cab.
The reality is the reason that many of the minicab industry in London is cheaper than the black cab, and if we're talking about Uber, is because this $40 billion company doesn't pay a penny tax in the UK. Its workforce, many of whom earn less than minimum wage, subsidise their earnings through UK tax benefits, tax credits and various benefits that they're entitled to, funded by UK taxpayers. Perhaps the GLA should have been looking at Uber's tax arrangements in the UK and pressurising the Chancellor to do something about that, rather than look at lowering our standards to meet theirs.
Do you think that there is an acknowledgement among the majority of black cab drivers that that drivers as a whole, black cab drivers, need to get into the modern world, by which I mean people now, in this day and age, want to get in a taxi and know that if they want to pay by credit card, they can pay by credit card.
Absolutely.
Things like that.
You are absolutely correct. And from next year, all taxis in London will take credit cards. It's going to be compulsory for us to take credit cards, and we welcome that. At the moment, about 40% do. This time next year, 100% of cabs will take credit cards. You talk about technology. We had apps long before the minicab industry. The two big ones in London are Get and Halo. You can hail a taxi on an app quite easily. The difference is that we have very high standards. 100% of our vehicles have to be wheelchair accessible. Our fares are set by TfL. We have to go through the licensing procedure. We do all of these things are done in the interest of public safety. What's being proposed here is a reduction in standards. It would be bad for us. It would be bad for London. It's an absolute joke that he's suggesting something like this without even speaking to us.
Could you, I mean, do you go to TfL and say, look, you are setting our fares, and this now, for whatever reason, and a lot of it is technology driven, is making us uncompetitive? Can they do something on that? Is that a bone of contention?
Right, it is a bone of contention with ours, but the reality is that the reason that not all of the minicab industry, the reason that some of the minicab industry is currently cheaper than us and cheaper than the rest of the minicab industry is because, as I just explained to you, their tax arrangement, they don't pay tax in the UK, their drivers are being subsidised by UK tax benefits. If you're suggesting, and perhaps we should suggest it, and my members are exempt from paying tax in the UK and we can claim various benefits and not have to comply with these strict rules that we have to, then perhaps we can lower our fares, yeah.
Do you think, a final point, and I know I keep coming back to the issue of technology, but that is what is driving so much of the massive change we've seen in cabs in the last 10 years.
Satellite navigation is fantastic.
Yeah, but people want to look at their phones, hit a button and say, this is where I am, can I have a cab in 5 minutes, in 10 minutes? And that's still not quite up to speed with black cabs, is it?
It absolutely is. You can do that. There's 10,000 black cabs on these apps at the moment. Both of the big apps that I've told you about offer fixed prices if people are concerned about the meter fares. Both of the apps are readily available. I use them all the time, so do many, many Londoners. This myth about us being archaic and not up with technology is just that, it's a myth. We've had these apps for 4 years, long before the minicab industry. From next year, we're taking credit cards. One of the other things that's been proposed by the GLA, from 2018, all taxis in London, all black cabs, brand new cabs, will be zero emission capable. We'll be driving 21st century electric vehicles, no emissions whatsoever. The Tories on the GLA are suggesting we should put that back to 2020. Why should we do that? We're keen to be cleaning up London's air. We sit in it. The minicab industry are not. Perhaps that's why he's supporting pushing us back.
Steve McNamara, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in.